Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are going to be listening to Monica Bloom, one of our amazing board members. She's a 10-year heterotaxy mama. So she's got some really good advice about organizing a medically complex life kind of after and within hospital visits. So,
hi, everyone. The idea of this session just comes from some memories that are just fixated in many of our minds, and everyone can relate, I know. But I'll give you a little background. If you don't know Lauren, one day you will. She'll make sure of that. But Lauren was prenatally diagnosed, so we knew that we were going into something big and scary. And we knew that there were some unknowns. But there's one area that nobody is ever prepared for in this medical world that you are launched into when you get that heterotaxy diagnosis. And that is, what do you do with yourselves once you're discharged from the hospital and you go home and you have to live your life? Lauren was inpatient for 9 days after she was born. And then we, to our surprise, went home, and we were expecting to just be living in the hospital for a while because that's what a lot of other kids with similar diagnoses did. So now we're like, oh, cool, we can go home. And it was a scramble, to say the least. That's kind of a kind way to explain it. And we got home with a car full of equipment and paperwork and expectations, and a new baby that was very fragile, that all of a sudden we needed to just, do something with. And so this is kind of where it began. We were a military family, so we were in military housing. So we had a kitchen with no drawers, and one closet for the entire house, except for the master bedroom. And, cockroaches coming under the door sometimes, the fun stuff that military families have to do. So we had to figure out a way to organize all this stuff in a safe manner that we could follow. We were also sent home, not knowing how long we would stay home. And in our case, a month after we were sent home to enjoy our newborn, we had to go back, and Lauren had her first emergency heart surgery and subsequently spent the next 5 or so months in and out of the hospital. After that first heart surgery, 2 weeks later, she had another slew of surgeries. And 2 weeks after that, she had another slew of surgeries. And we were sent home at that point, and she was more fragile than she was before her first heart surgery. And so that was an interesting shift. And she also was sent home then with a feeding tube, which we didn't have before, and 13 meds that we had to give, some of them 2 hours around the clock. And it was really, really challenging. And our insurance didn't feel like we qualified for at-home. So 13 meds around the clock every 2 hours. My husband's, he's military, so we had shifts. And we had responsibilities. I was also pumping every 3 hours, and Lauren was on 24-hour feeds. And so there were things to do. And then there was the syringes, and there was the tracking her feeding and tracking all sorts of things, lots of people to call, appointments to make. And I feel it when I think back, I remember crying and never sleeping. That's all I can really remember. And I'm thinking there's got to be a better way. This is not fair. We've already kind of been given this difficult thing. It is not fair that the hospital says, hey, you're good to go. We'll take care of you. We're here for you. Go home and do this as if it's normal. Anyways, I could go on and on and on about that. But we slowly learned little tricks as we went. And we tweaked those, and then we'd have to move to another place, and we'd have to tweak them again. And then we've traveled places, and we have to tweak them again. Then we had ER visits, and then we'd tweak them because of that. So what it comes down to is the goal is, how can you organize all that stuff those schedules, those supplies, those meds, those things that you need to do in a way that it becomes as little of a hindrance to normal life as possible. And I can tell you now, we're almost 10 years since my daughter's diagnosis, and I still tweak this frequently, but it's become so much easier. And so I'm just going to go down my cool little old school bullet list and kind of explain what's on here. And then I actually brainstormed a few things to add to it later on. So if you feel like writing down notes, you can. But the biggest thing that was kind of a shock was medication management. And I mean like the logistics of it, storing the meds and keeping track of refilling them and, and just remembering when to give what and how to keep them from taking over your entire kitchen, because they will. And so number one, visuals. Even if you're not a visual person, a visual is helpful because it gives you kind of a baseline for not just you, but anybody else that's going to have to take care of your child. And I always, when I think about organizing things, I think, okay, if I was freaking out and passed out on the floor and my child needed emergency care, would they be able to look around and see something that gave them information about my child in my home? And so we have a chart up in our kitchen that just shows her medication schedule when we give stuff. And I made mine editable, so I can change check marks if we've changed what time we've given her something, or if we've DC'd a med or added something in. And you can make that as fancy or as boring as possible. I did not include it as a visual here because HIPAA. So, and no, I don't want to disclose too much about my child. And so you can also on those visuals include if you have a hydration or feeding regimen or restrictions for your kids. So if you have a babysitter, you don't expect them to memorize all this because it's overwhelming, and they can just look at the chart and say, oh yeah, if I give her this med, I need to make sure that she drinks orange juice afterwards or beforehand, that kind of thing. And if you don't have a laminator yet, as a former teacher, get yourself a laminator. It's a very important accessory because you can make these things and laminate them and they'll last forever. And then use those alarms on your phone. Use the technology. I know it's really annoying, but you can think that you've got everything memorized, and then something happens and you've forgotten to give your kid their blood thinner, and then it's like, oh shoot, and so like just give yourself that grace that you're human and you're gonna forget and you're gonna have those bad days. And if you just have those things like alarms and visuals to help you just kind of quick reference and remember things, just take the time to do it. You'll thank yourself. If you want to see what some of my visuals in my home look like, message me. I'll share stuff with you. The next thing we learned very quickly is minimizing trips to the pharmacy. And every time we moved, we had to kind of reset this whole process. If you have the option to do mail order meds, at first we did not trust them. And because we're like, well, what happens if they don't make it? What happens if it's, if it's like 300 degrees outside and they leave it on your front porch, it's like, so there are all these things, but I've learned, you can actually get the same meds, more of them at a time if you do it mail order. So I'd rather pick up something or have something mailed to me every 3 months as opposed to going to the pharmacy once a month. And so use those tools to your advantage. Depending on your pharmacy, depending on where you live, some pharmacies do medication synchronization. So they work with your insurance and your doctors to synchronize when those refills happen. We've had maybe 2 pharmacies and all the ones we've ever worked with that are willing to do that. So you need to ask. Sometimes you just need to tweak it yourself to make that work. And that's fewer times that you need to step away from normal life to go pick those things up. Mark things on your calendar, use those alarms for when things need to be refilled. But also, if you're new to this crazy medication life, you may not know, but most people know. With technology today, most places, they can send you a text reminder when something needs a refill, because it's life. And it really sucks to be in that position that you have one dose left of something that's really critical for your child and it's Saturday. So you know that you're going to be missing a whole day or two before you can get refills. So look at your resources to see what you can find in your local area for minimizing trips to the pharmacy. So medications at school, again, it depends on what kind of school your kid goes to and what their paperwork requirements are. My daughter started going to school for the first time this last year, and we had to fill out a separate complicated form for every med that she had to take at school, every dose change, and we had to fill out a form if we had to stop giving it to her, and all sorts of fun things. Ask your school for extra copies of that for you to just have at home. You're gonna be using more. That's our life. So if there's anything like that where it's a form you're gonna have to fill out and resubmit at some point in time, just get those copies and keep them on file. Then, you've gone to the doctor, all of a sudden there's a new med at school. You can just send your kid on Monday with that paper, and less stress on you to have to go to the office after you've dropped them off and ask them for the paper and do all this and this and that. You kind of have a system in place. And then do understand that you cannot assume that even the nurse at the school knows how to administer medications or monitor them. In a lot of schools, yes, they have registered nurses, but in a lot of schools, there is somebody that's playing nurse that has never put meds through a G-tube or anything of that sort, or hasn't had to give a liquid med to a kid with a serious aversion that doesn't have G-tube. So just assume they don't know and take the time to teach them. Make an appointment with them before school starts and help them to learn, if they'll take the time to do that. Depends on where you go. And then if you are as lucky as we are, then you'll have 3 people that wanted to learn about it at the school. So they had backup people that could give your kids meds or deal with the G-tube. Some places it's not, but just kind of think about those things ahead of time so you're not scrambling at the beginning of the school year. Moving on to traveling with medications. We have learned, we pre-draw our meds, and I'll talk more about that later. But just know with traveling with medications, if you've never traveled with medications for your complex kid, it can be an absolute headache. And then sometimes they'll just surprise you. Like on our trip here, they didn't even take them out of the bag. That's the first time ever we've ever traveled where they haven't stopped us and opened everything up and questioned us like we were a drug cartel. So put your stuff in a Ziploc bag so it's nice and clear, in the original containers. And that is somewhere in here. Ask your pharmacist when you have medications, can I get an extra container that looks just like that with a label on it? It's helpful for traveling. It's also helpful when you're sending meds to school, so you don't have to send the whole bottle of amoxicillin to school, because if they spill it, you're kind of SOL, right? And so you send the amount that they need, keep the rest at home, and it's still official. And then TSA Cares is a thing at the airports that you can call ahead of time and say, hey, we've got this complex situation and we want to contact you guys ahead of time. Sometimes if you're at an awesome airport, they will have somebody meet you there and guide you through, and it's amazing. And sometimes they will say, well, here's your contact. So if you run into trouble, just give us a call while you're at the airport. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, good for you. Thanks for letting us know. And then they're not help at all. But it's worth a shot to try before you travel. And that'll make that element of it a little easier. But basically what TSA Cares does is they kind of help you navigate when you're at security and they're emptying your bag of all your medical supplies. They can kind of help facilitate to make sure that it doesn't become one of those things where they're forcing you to throw out your child's formula because you don't want to open it and test it, because then it spoils, right? And so those kinds of things, they can kind of help with that. So I'm going to talk about pre-drawn meds, because this revolutionized our whole thing at home. And when they send you home from the hospital with all these meds, and if you have babies, they're most likely liquid meds or pills that they ask you to crush and put in water and give to your child. They are kind of with the assumption that, oh, okay, it's this time. I'm going to set my baby down and they're perfectly fine. They don't need me for anything. And I'm going to go try to accurately draw up my meds and give it to them. And then I'll have plenty of time to wash the syringe. That's only one-time use, but I have to use it for 30 days. And then I'll have that aside and then I can go on with my life. And it's not realistic. It is not realistic. And those things will consume your life if you let them. And so when we first started to try to figure out a way to make medication logistical management in our home easier so it wasn't consuming our day, we had like red Solo cups across the counter. And each one, we would draw up the meds, we label the cup and stick the pre-drawn meds in there. We did not have caps for our syringes, so we stuck them point up and hoped that they didn't get squooshed. And then we, at least for however many syringes we had that we could draw up meds for, at least we had that many that we could just pull and grab and give to our screaming child and be done with it. We also had a container where all of the dirty stuff went. And I know that just sounds like simple, basic. Well, yeah, it's like you put your dishes in the sink, you put your meds in the bin. But we didn't think about that ahead of time. We just kind of started making piles everywhere and it's really started taking over the kitchen. So we learned that quickly. And then the whole pre-drawn med thing turned into something big, because then we had refrigerated meds and then we had the pill meds that right before you give, you have to, dissolve in water. You can't dissolve those ahead of time, and pre-dissolve them 2 weeks out, right? That's not really ideal. And so we had different ways that we had to organize certain meds. One day I was at, I don't know, we were at like Big Five Sporting Goods or something like that. And they had tackle boxes on clearance. And I was like, oh, this is handy. I could use this for my craft room. And then it was just like, and I'm like, I can use this for syringes at home and it would take up less counter space and it would be safe from things spilling. And so in our house, that worked for us. We got tackle boxes and we ended up shopping around and buying ones that were bigger. So when the syringe is drawn up, it actually fits in there. And now we've come to the point where we have one that has for meds that are drawn, and we have one for just the syringes for those meds. And while that was super useful at home, it actually became useful in our emergency settings. When Lauren was in those critical months, I felt like we were home on the weekdays and at the hospital on the weekends and then we'd stay for a couple of weeks and we'd come home for a little bit and then, oh, the weekend's over, we're gonna go back to the hospital is what it felt like. And if you know what it's like to go into the ER with a kid that has a whole bunch of really critical meds that need to be taken on time. It takes the ER a very long time to get those meds for your kid, and they will not get them in time, and they will not give them to your child in time. And if you don't have the most alert or attentive staff when you're inpatient, it can happen as well. So when we had our own pre-drawn meds guided, we labeled each section inside the tackle box so it was clear what was what. And when we had to go for an emergency, we grabbed that tackle box already drawn up and went off to the hospital. I remember this one time, one of the hospitals we were in, we waited 14 hours before we got any sort of intervention for my daughter, who was supposed to could have had an obstruction. So that was a whole other topic. But we basically said, our kid needs these meds. We're going to give them to her. And we did. And they were grateful because they weren't allowed to give them to her. And they were tied down by the pharmacy that was dragging their heels, getting the meds drawn up. And so our kid stayed healthy while they were waiting in the ER to become more healthy. So, yeah. And so that whole tackle box pre-drawn med thing is great. Disclaimer, if you have like a home health care nurse or a nurse that goes with your child to school, there are very strict laws for them, rules for them as far as meds go. For example, my daughter has a home health care nurse that comes periodically. If we have pre-drawn meds in our house, she is not allowed to use them. Even if they're ones that she drew up before, she's only allowed to give the meds that she's drawn up for that day with her own two hands. She's not allowed to draw up meds for us for the future, even though it's super helpful for us for her to do that. And so if this is a system you want to adopt, just know that it is solely for your convenience and for other caregivers that come in your house that are not medical folks, babysitters, grandparents, whatever. You cannot pre-draw meds for your school staff unless, and this is how we get away with it, because we don't trust that they'll draw the right dose. We, like, for example, Lauren's amoxicillin, we draw it up and we rubber band it to the container that has the official label of that's the dose she needs and that's the medication it is. And so it's physically attached to it and they are okay with that. Talk to your school, talk to whatever, to make sure that if you want to adopt a system like that, to do that.
Monica,
Yes.
before you move on, I also wanted to address older kids that are actually able to take pills. So my daughter takes about 30 pills a day. It's quite a lot to manage. And it's very time consuming in the morning as she's rifling through all of her med bottles and trying to pull one out of each one. So she was actually working at a pharmacy, which was a huge godsend to us, but they have pill packs and they can help you sync your meds. Like if you go to them and say, I want my meds all to be filled on the 5th of each month, they will short fill them to the point that they can get all of them to be filled once a month, because I have lived my life at the pharmacy. Like the pharmacist and I are like BFFs. We just walk in multiple times a week and so they can sync your meds to the point that you are only picking up once a month. And then these pill packs, and we ran into problems with the pharmacy doing it just because hers is so extensive. And even when I printed out like a whole chart of everything that needed to go in pill pack 1 and pill pack 2, they didn't get it right. So we got on Amazon, and Amazon, you can get these nice pill packs. They're called cold fill pill packs, and they come with a little tray and a little roller, and you can fill those packs yourself. So we fill once a month and we fill out this pill pack, and she has one for the morning, she has one for the evening. And it has just been a game changer for us. Also super helpful when we're sending her, like when she was spending time with her dad, I knew what she was taking. Like I knew that I was sending the right medicine with her and that she was taking it. And it helps a lot with compliance too as they get older, because I label them with the date. And if they don't take it, so it's been a big game changer for us.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's also when you set up the system, once you have the system in place and you have your aging and growing kids, you can use that system to teach them to be independent with their meds. And so Lauren is 9, and I can say, I'm over there stuck wrangling her 2-year-old brother, and I can say, can you go please grab your lisinopril for me? And she can look in there and she can see exactly where it is. It's already drawn up. She knows all she has to do is go grab it and bring it to me. And so it kind of like streamlines that whole retrieval process. And again, I say that sounds really small, but when you look at the spectrum of, just doing life, not having to get up off your high knee to walk across the room and deal with that makes a huge difference. And so I'm sure I'm skipping some things on the on my list, but you can read it. Everybody can read. So other types of organization that people have used for their meds, I've seen somebody just use like a silverware organizer, and they've dedicated a drawer. So at home, they can do it that way. I've seen people use like scrapbooking drawers. We had a little tiny, one of those cute little desktop accessory things that has 3 little drawers, and we put one in the fridge. It fit in the fridge great, and we could put our little like refrigerated meds in there. And then we, like I said, we got another tackle box, and it has the syringes that we use. And so once they're clean, they have a place to go. And so then the medical looking parts of our kitchen take up one spot. It's almost like the coffee corner, but it's the med corner. And it kind of helps things feel less chaotic. When you have a lot of equipment that the medical world's like the DME and insurance tell you, DME means durable medical equipment. It's the companies that send you your supplies. If you're new to the medical world, that's what that is. You'll hear about that. And so the DME send you 4 syringes that you're supposed to make last for the month. So you have to keep rewashing them. The way we do it was I have a little shoebox size bin next to the sink, and it has we just throw our used syringes in there, and underneath it is another bin that we stack, and it has those bottle brushes are great for cleaning inside syringes, and we have a little mini colander so we can wash the lids without losing them in the garbage disposal. And we, anything that we need to wash that is medical related goes in that bin. So it doesn't get mixed up with your stuff in the sink, doesn't get lost, and it doesn't get mixed up with the clean stuff. So we have it in there. And then when life allows, we can go and get it and wash it. And then we have our cool tackle box to put it away. So it's like, there's a place for everything. And it's a really easy system. Then you get all the stuff from the DME that it's like way more than you'll ever need. Like we have the lifetime supply of cotton tip syringes or cotton tip swabs. Like they think we need to swab our kid all over her body 1 million times a day, and we don't. And so we have in my daughter's room a designated medical drawer, a designated medical spot in the closet. And so there's a place for everything. And we rank it by when we need it. So if it's something that we could use a couple months down the road, it goes in the closet. If it's something like when our syringes kind of wear out and we need to replace them, that goes in the drawer that's a little easier to get to, so we can just grab them. And then the stuff that we have to use today is in the kitchen. So we have a kind of a way to do that. In your home or in your life, it depends on your space. If you live in a teeny tiny apartment as opposed to, a 3,000 square foot house, it's going to be different. And of course, the amount of medical stuff your child needs is going to make a difference as well. I make sure I'm not missing anything on that part. So we also, it might be further down. I can't remember where I put it, but you're going to have times where you're inundated with supplies that you no longer need. And just so you know, there are tons of Facebook groups and other organizations that will, where you can pawn your supplies off to people that would absolutely love them because their insurance won't let them have them. I don't know how many times I've gotten the feeding bag so I could actually put formula in the pump to feed my child because my insurance said we didn't need them anymore. And I got them from other parents. And so the medical parent world likes to share things like that. So there's ways to get rid of your stuff to help other families and stuff like that. So you don't, just because the medical supply companies send you something, if you truly don't need it, you are not obligated to keep it. But the supply companies cannot take them back. And so I think I have somewhere in there examples of those kinds of places. So I put what the DME, and I say it that way, what the DME. So to take away the stress of trying to navigate the DME, it kind of reminds me of navigating insurance, but not so bad. The people that work in the warehouses to get your medical equipment know nothing about medical equipment. They have no idea what they're giving you or why. And so it is really important that when you need something, that you are very, very clear to them what you need. And so my suggestions to you, if you get sent home from the hospital with the kid with the NG tube and all the supplies to take care of that, and then your DME calls you and says, hey, what do you need? If there is a specific type of port or type of syringe or anything that you know works best for your kid, don't hesitate to ask for that. They're going to send whatever is cheapest for them to send you, but they have other varieties at their disposal. And the DME companies can decide what they want to supply and what they don't. If you have a great company, they're going to be the kind that like, we don't have this, but let's see if we can order it. If you have a not so great company, they're going to be the ones that will say, we don't feel like carrying that anymore. So you're going to have to switch companies if you want to keep getting it. And so you just have to feel them out and see how they're going to help you. But if there's something specific that you know works for you, get online and search for that thing as if you're like a hospital person trying to order supplies for the hospital. Go onto those medical ordering sites and find out like the item numbers specifically and exactly how those things are listed in the catalogs. And when you talk to your DME, ask them for those things that way. Because they have, if you say, I really want the 12-inch right angle extension that glows in the dark, they're going to have no idea what you're talking about. All the G-tube folks know, oh yeah, we know what brand that is. That's the one, the purple one, right? And they don't know. So you've got to give them the specific item numbers and those things. Otherwise, what you're going to end up with is boxes on your porch of a bunch of crap that you don't need. And then you're stressed out because you don't have what you need. And so be specific, know what you're needing. And it is not bad to ask for more. A lot of times they are limited to what they can send you because that's what insurance says they can send you. And so if you're finding that those 4 syringes are just not lasting you for a month, say, is there a way that we can work out to get a few more? And a lot of times they'll try to work with you and you can get more. Sometimes they won't, but it never hurts to ask. And Renee has a question, so I will let her throw that in.
I was going to add a feedback comment to that. A lot of insurance companies get paid for like the formula aspect and its umbrella coverage, everything else depending upon your DME. So they will tell you that they are providing like say G2 pads or syringes as a courtesy item and not one that they're billing insurance for. So you sometimes have to get picky with your DME to figure out how they're actually billing your insurance. Because if they're not billing your insurance for those items, it really comes down to you have less leverage in terms of asking for items. But on the converse side, you can actually discuss exactly with your insurance company first what you're entitled to, because the DME very well might say, because they're selling you, they're giving you it to you as a courtesy item, so they'll only give you 2 syringes. But if you talk to your insurance company, they could say that no, under the umbrella coding that they're giving you, that requires them to give you at least 20 syringes as a courtesy item, then you can go back to your DME with that leverage from your insurance company.
Yes, definitely. Let those insurance companies and those DME companies, make their little dance and get what you need. When you run into the problem where you need something and the insurance and the DMEs are giving you all sorts of grief, that is a really good time to go back to your provider themselves and rewrite the order in the same way that you're going to advocate to get certain types of meds. Say, this is what we need in our home. Can you say that? And they can actually give some sort of rationale to the insurance company as to why you need so many of something. We know kids with G tubes where something about the inside of their stomach makes the G tube break down like in less than a month, and they tell you you can't have more than one every 3 months. That poses a problem, right? Because that otherwise, so then they can say, well, you can allow them to have more, or they will be going to the ER and you're going to be paying for that so they can get that new tube replaced. And so what's going to cost you less? And a lot of times they'll say, okay, they can have one every 2 months instead of every 3 months. And so you kind of start to win those battles that way. And so just, this is one of those things that you just keep pushing for in the same way that you push for treatments and for stuff. The equipment is just as important in that way. Also, our insurance requires that the medical company calls us every month before they ship stuff out, no matter whether the order changed or not, to make sure that we still need what we need. And I appreciate that because I can tell you in the 9 years we've had to deal with this, there was only one company that we've had where they've actually sent the right things every month for an entire year. Every month, even to this day, when we get a shipment, there is a mistake made and we get too much or too little of something, or there's missing something, or we get trach supplies and my daughter doesn't have a trach. And I mean, I even know some lady who got a Old Navy sweater in her box. And so I don't know where that is medically necessary, but I want to know the story behind that. So anyways, so let's go down to, we've been talking about supply organization and we've talked about that. Okay, yeah, let's talk about emergency prep and alternative caregivers. So here is where this system is just golden, right? It works for you and it makes your life easier. And I'm going to give you a classic example. In the year 2020, the world was all awry. I was very pregnant with my second child, and we were living in an area that had severe wildfires. And so the air quality was dangerous. So me and my heterotaxy child were keeping ourselves in our house. We did not leave our house. We had a home health care nurse who was supposed to be available to us when I went to the hospital to have my younger son, and then she got COVID. And so then even though she was better with COVID, she's had further exposures. And back then the rule was even with an exposure, you wait another 2 weeks. So we lost her services for a month. And so we had neighbors who were backups and they had no idea, not a clue what to do with Lauren. And so we invited them over and they blessed them. They learned the basics of G-tube care and what to do should it fall out, and what to do if my daughter all of a sudden loses consciousness, and what levels of blueness were okay and what ones warranted a 911 call, and all those scary things that if you're not a medical person, freak you out. And they learned all those things, but we had those visuals. And we had the pre-drawn meds, and we had these stuff stored in those designated places. And so it was a blessing to just say, okay, here's my daughter and here's what she needs, and here's where you can find that information. And it was already there. I didn't have to think about it. My pregnant brain wouldn't have been able to think about it at that point, and it was great to have. And then it was time to deliver my son, and our backup person got COVID. And so I remembered that we had a neighbor that we'd known in the past, and I hadn't seen her since we'd moved back, and she lived 4 blocks down the road. And I remember she's a retired pediatric nurse. So we went and desperately knocked on her door. And we said, can you take care of my child while I have my baby? And she did. And I didn't get to train her on Lauren, but we had the pre-drawn meds, and we had the chart, and we had all this stuff in place. And she's like, it was not a big deal. And Lauren kind of talked me through it. Of course, Lauren was telling her how to do everything in her way. So that kind of helps too when you have a child that likes to be the boss. But you often have a child that cannot articulate those things. So when you have it all there, it is really, really, really useful. So those types of things are going to help you in emergencies. And then you can have those types of things also in what I call a go bag. It's kind of similar to your bag that you have prepared when you're preparing to go have a baby. What are you going to need in the hospital? Have it ready before you go into labor, so your husband can just grab it and follow you in. But this one is one that you keep all the time. And at first we had a hard time with the go bag because our child's needs kept changing. And our thought was, oh, let's just have a few of the meds in there. Let's have a few of everything. But then those things weren't relevant 2 weeks or a month down the road when the emergency happened. So then we went to the hospital with a bunch of stuff we didn't need and missing stuff we did. So we took the visuals that we had and put them in there. We took some of our spare stuff that we knew we would need and just always had a little bit in there. And our go bag is actually doubled as our diaper bag and the bag. It wasn't just a bag that sat just in case. It was the one that we used every day. We used to have one that sat as just in case, and then I'd forget about it and it wasn't up to date. So then we started using our everyday backpack, and it worked. And that tackle box can just go in there when we need it. And everything we can just grab and go. Some of the other things that we always have in our go bag, and if you're a medical person, your kid may have these in their backpack even and at school, but we always had pull socks. We got the Amazon special pull socks and it works just fine. Always had a thermometer. When we had refrigerated meds, we would have a spare insulated lunch bag in there. So if we needed to grab stuff from the fridge, we had a place to put it and keep it cool. A few syringes, a few little extra things that you need. I'll talk about the brochure on your child in a moment. And of course, the typical diaper bag type of things, spare clothes, comfort items, snacks, water. If you don't have one of those, medical mamas, please just get one, because trying to put together a bag of things you need when you are in a hurry because your child's on a helicopter to the hospital and you need to get there too is not a fun thing to try to think about. Your brain doesn't want to do that. So have it ready just in case. And Murphy's Law, if you have it ready, you will not have to go to the hospital. Let me talk about, I skipped it, but let me talk about your child's handbook or brochure. I always joke, I wish I had a handbook to raise my child. Well, we do. We have a medical, I call it the brochure on Lauren. And basically, when I first made it, and still so, it is a glance at the most important things that someone needs to know If I called 911 and then I had to send my child on a helicopter to the hospital and they got there hours before me, here's the information about my child that they need to know. If they do not have the records, and being a military family, most of the time we'd send her to a hospital that did not have her records, and that's terrifying. So we would send her with her, how to take care of my child handbook. And I don't know how many medical people said, oh my goodness, this is awesome. It is also a very, very handy document to have when you're taking your child at 3 a.m. and you have no reserve to talk to the people and they're asking you all those questions. I don't know how many times they'll start to ask me everything and I just pull it out. I'm just like, here you go. I can't think right now. And I'm just going to let you look at this and then just ask me questions if you have them. And it has streamlined the process so much. They recognize it's not an official medical document, but it's still extremely helpful. And then they can compare it to what they have in the system and they can ask you clarifying questions, and it actually helps them to update the system sometimes. And this document, it's going to have their diagnoses, it's going to have their baselines, it's going to have their surgical and medical history, it's going to have there's examples of them, by the way, in the packet. Yeah, you can actually, yes. And so, like with Lauren's, her diagnosis, like with most of our kids, it's like if they had some sort of diagnostic something, and then they had surgery, so their anatomy changed a little bit with surgery. So I have like what their congenital diagnosis was. So it's clear to them where they started, because that really matters. And so in Lauren's, now I don't have hers listed here, but you can see I would list her congenital defects, her respiratory history. She had laryngomalacia, so that's important for them to know if they have to intubate her, what her abdominal defects were. And you could change that to whatever. If you had a kid with liver stuff, you could add that or take it away, if anything like that. Then the second thing, and it was really important to put this like right after diagnosis, is their baselines. Because when my daughter was an infant, she was pink and beautiful at 80% oxygen. Okay. If somebody saw that in the ER, they'd be freaking out. And so that tells them, we don't need to be, shoving oxygen up her nose right now, because that's her norm, right? My daughter's resting heart rate, because she was right atrial isomerism, and she's tachycardic. So at rest, she was at 150, and that was okay. And that kind of thing. Her temperature was kind of low. So those things they need to know. And especially at hospitals that are teaching hospitals with young kids that have not seen complex kids, they have not seen kids where their baselines would be a normal, healthy person's critical state. And so it's so important to put the baselines down. And then I listed what my child's protocol is, because again, we have those fever protocols, we have those medication protocols. And there's things that you would send our kids to the ER for that a typical person might not need to go to the ER for. So list those. And then I put the surgical history. So we had this certain heart anatomy at the top, but if you looked at my daughter's heart today, it does not look like that at all. Her things have been done. And so her anatomy is different, but they need to know that happened and why and where and all that stuff. And then I have the medication list. This is where it became really handy, because our kids' medications the list is long and it's always changing. And to remember that off the top of your head is impossible. And they say, bring all your medications to your appointment. I'm just like, I'm not bringing a suitcase there for you to see that, it's like, I'm not bringing all those to the appointment. So having them listed there, and the information they want to know is what it is, why are you using it, right? Because we used erythromycin to help my daughter poop, not to help her heal from an infection. So they need to know the difference on why you're using things. And also the dose and concentration, all those fun things. We listed, and we put kind of this right here is kind of similar to the chart we have on our wall in our house. And so like it's basically a combination of her eating routine and her med routine all together and what it looks like throughout the day. I don't even know if that's accurate to today, but it's an example. And that actually helps the hospital because if they have to admit that person, they kind of know what their norms are and know when to order formula and have it and kind of keep them on their normal regimen if that's what their goal is. We tell them what kind of therapies they normally have. It is so nice to be able to continue those therapies if you get admitted into the hospital, because then you're not playing as much catch up as before, as if you missed a month and then you have to go back and start some things over. And so if they know that you get, OT twice a week, sometimes the hospital can accommodate that and continue that in the hospital. And then you list all the people that are your medical team. And this is where I have an example, Dr. Danito, he's our cardiac surgeon in Boston. This is how you get a hold of him. And he's the guy that did the bi-vent on my daughter. And so they know that. And then we would probably list the other surgeons that did other surgeries on my daughter's heart and what they did, so that if they have a question about that, they can contact those people directly. And we're not trying to dig up that information when we are stressed about our child in the hospital. It's all there. We, being a military family, we moved around a lot. So we have a section for the previous doctor. So, Dr. So-and-so, from 3 moves ago had us started on this regimen and we've kept it, but our current doctors aren't really on board with that yet. They just said, hey, you're doing that, whatever, so they might need to contact somebody from 2 hospitals ago. And so it's helpful for them to have that information. And it's a lot of information packed into 2 or 3 pages. But when your life is, hard, not having to regurgitate that all the time is, it helps maintain your sanity, and it helps for clearer communication between those who are caring for your kid. And again, like I said, it's the handbook or the brochure for your child. You can make copies of this. It goes in her backpack. There's a copy at her school. There's a copy available for anybody that's going to babysit. There's a copy in your go bag. So if there's an emergency anywhere, anytime, you can whip it out and show it. Some people like to have a digital copy, so they make a QR code and you can do it that way. And so that is definitely something to look into if you haven't made one of those for your kid. I have included I made actually what you were looking at was kind of a skeletal version of what I use. You are more than welcome to go and change it and fill it out, customize it to yours, or do your own thing. There are also people on Etsy that sell formatted stuff for the same reason. If you want something that is pleasing to the eye because aesthetics make you calm, you can do that too, or you can just create your own, however you want to do it. But I highly recommend that you have something like this to have on hand. My routine suggestions: once you have your organizational setup in place, check your go bag once a month. Just make it a routine. Okay, it's the first of the month. I'm just going to go make sure that it's up to date. Takes a couple minutes and then you don't have to worry about it, right? Every week we check on our medication supplies. We've kind of got it down to routine, either my husband or I, about once a week, sometimes twice a week if we're busy. We will just stand there and draw up all the meds and stick them in the tackle box. And all our meds are drawn up for the week. And it's so easy. Sending my daughter to school in the morning, I need to give her some meds. I just grab them, give them to her, and we move on with life. It's very nice to have it that way. And then whenever any medications are added or changed or removed, just do it right away. Get it changed at the school, get it changed in your information, and it's done. So you can see how that kind of streamlines the whole process of all those little details that you need to organize. And then there were some other things that I brainstormed as we've been learning this weekend about other things that you can include in this handbook. Your POLST. So tell me how to say that again. Yes. Yeah. So your orders for life-sustaining treatment. Those, what your wishes are. That would be a good thing to also have in that handbook of your child. The consensus paper would be a very, very valuable thing to have on hand with your child's handbook. You know, it might be a thing where your school called 911 and transported your kid to the wrong hospital. And it's the hospital that has no knowledge of your child, but they have this consensus paper, right? So there might be, or you're traveling, you're on your Make-A-Wish trip and you're in Florida. That might help, right? And then if you have a documented fever protocol or treatment protocol from your doctor, we had an instance where we took our daughter to the ER and they sent us back home because they said no such protocol exists and they have no idea what we're talking about and they're not going to treat us but we didn't have the printed document from our doctor. And so then we went and got it and we went back and then they treated us. It was kind of annoying, but so also if you have allergies or dietary restrictions for your child, if they have, they're allergic to morphine, those are things you need to include on there. Fortunately, our daughter doesn't have those things, so we don't have anything on that. But please do include those things on there if you are doing that. If you think of more and you want to share it with the community, never hesitate to go on to the Heterotaxy Connection support page and say, hey, I have my kid's medical handbook, and I just realized it's really valuable to have this piece of information, and I wanted to let you guys know that. Please do share, because that's what parents need to do. We need to share our information with each other and kind of make this as less stressful as possible. All right. Questions, ideas, criticisms? I don't care.
Okay, so here is a mom who has got it together. If the rest of you are reading what Jennifer is saying, she's got a great system in place. And
we sent out an email to all the virtual folks, and we will also include it for our in-person people. We'll stick it in the group me, but with these files with the editable version, which is not edible, which is the one we looked at, but also our in-person folks, you can see if you turn to the back of your packet that you have, there's examples of this filled out and some pictures of the tackle box situation and stuff. And that should also be in the email for the virtual folks that we sent this morning.
Excellent. And thank you, Jennifer, for explaining how you guys do it, because that's vastly different than how we do it, but it looks like it works for you. And that's awesome.
Add to your baseline is, as she said, have a physical copy of your child's EKG. If it's not typical, like if your child has an abnormal EKG at baseline, that's actually a very important thing to carry with you, because nothing will freak out an emergency room. And again, and you can say, this is not my child's baseline, but if they don't have a physical copy of that to look at, then they don't know what that means in comparison to what they're looking at. So we found that a very critical thing to carry with us.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we'll take note of that one too. I like that idea. Yes.
There are some medical alert bracelets. There's tons of different options, but there are some that come with the option to add an online profile. The one we use is called Road ID. And all it is on the inside of the engraved, my son uses the one that has like a little silicone band. They send you 3 sizes so the kid can grow. And then on the inside of the engraved faceplate, there's a little pin. So in an emergency, a provider can go to roadid.com if I'm not there. They put in the pin I immediately get a ping saying that someone other than me has accessed his profile, and it has everything in there. I can put every single medication, physician. I can have a list of who to call first if they can't, or me. And then if they can't get me, you know, who else to call, who are his doctors, what's his baseline, all that stuff. So that's just another layer for, say I'm not with him, say, you know, something happens and we're both in the car together. That's a way that, and they don't know where to look for my go bag or my go sheet or my brochure or whatever. That's another way that another layer that we have built in for ways that they can access. And I have a flight nurse friend who I consulted on what to put on that ID, because that's a question we get a ton. And what he said was, if they take a kid's shirt off, they will see a sternotomy scar. They'll know, okay, this is what's going on. We've got something, there's some history here. So he said it would be good to put baseline oxygen if that's different than typical. He said, if the kid is on blood thinners, make sure you put that. Those were big ones that he said he would be interested sort of pre-hospital to know about, especially like the baseline oxygen saturations, because that's something that they will always be putting oxygen, but you know, if your kid doesn't need it, it can actually do more harm than good sometimes. So those are just a couple of things to add.
Thank you. Yeah. If you're not a dinosaur like me and you want to use you want to use technology to hold that information, that's always helpful. And it's yeah, I think that's very valuable. Thank you. Any more questions or comments of me or anyone else, or ideas that anyone wants to add? Yes, Amy.
I was watching this TV show Speechless. Have you all watched it? Love it. I love it when they went to the ER and she pulls out the binders that are like color coded with medication history. And it's all like, they're talking about which font she chose because it was like easier to read. And she had it for all the kids. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, I felt seen because I have sheets for all my kids. Like when I go in, I just like toss the sheet because I was like, I don't want to educate you on this, read it. And so it's been in a TV show.
And do not feel, I always felt crazy bringing those things into the ER. Like I was that neurotic, like mom that everything had to be in place. But then I realized, you know what, this has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with self-care for me as a caregiver. It's really what it comes down to is how can I take care of my sanity so that I can take care of my children, and get organized, and it will get easier. The end. Unless there's another comment. Oh, yes, Renee.
Commentary today. Isn't everyone glad I'm dragging this out? One other thing I was going to say is, depending upon how many refrigerated meds your kid needs, like getting a mini fridge can like revolutionize your life. Like honest to God, and then it just gets to be dedicated to meds, and you don't have to worry about if the leftovers are getting stuck with the, you know, stuff that the amoxicillin or something's getting knocked over next to your ham and cheese. So they're relatively inexpensive, and it can also make it easier for your nursing staff because then they automatically know that anything in that mini fridge belongs to your child and can be accessible that way. So
You know,
I'll shut up now.
You reminded me of something. Oh my gosh,
You're
we could
wonderful.
go on and on with this. Sorry. When we traveled from Texas to Seattle in the middle of the pandemic and it was hot as Hades, we actually had one of those coolers that you can plug into your car. So you're not having to stop and get ice, because there were a lot of places closed and you couldn't get ice. And it was awesome because we kept all the refrigerated stuff in the cooler in the car while we were driving. And so those things exist and they're worth the cost. So I should put that on the travel section next time.
Well, we are definitely going to keep updating this. We're going to keep adding to this. I vote we get maybe a thread going in HC support,
Yes.
in the support group, and we can all like, the HC, as Dr. Sava calls us. The HC. I vote we keep this going. Let's keep sharing. Let's keep just building on what we started here. Like I'm just watching the chat. I'm like, okay, yep. Here's all our things that we're doing. And Oh, yeah, we have.
And they go for the dishwasher.
Yes. We have a type of syringe that we will put in the chat eventually that I've had mine for 9 years and they still have numbers on them. They're not for G tubes, but the G tube adapters will fit on them. Okay. Look at that. Okay, guys, we're going to keep this going. We're going to keep this going. This is obviously something we're all really excited about and I love it.
Thank you, Monica.